Awesome. Well, hey guys, thank you so much, Avi and Zoe and the Beacon organization. We really appreciate being here today. We have really an exciting opportunity here to talk about cybersecurity. It is a hot topic right now, and executives want to know, what can you do? So the goal and really what we want to get across here today is educate you a little bit more about what we can do, what you can do as an executive, and some of the different things that are out there. You hear all the key terms like phishing and malware and ransomware and so forth, but what does it all mean, right? What does it mean to you, and what risk are you willing to take on as an executive? And at the end of the day, everything falls on your shoulders, right? So if the organization gets hit with ransomware, what did you do to protect the organization before that happened, or what didn't you do, right? So we have some amazing speakers here today. I'll let them give their backgrounds and share some knowledge as well. We have Brian Linder, who is with Checkpoint Software Technologies. And Brian, if you want to give a little background about yourself there.
Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. 28 years in cybersecurity. I'm a threat prevention expert here at Checkpoint. We're a global leader. I think we're the largest sole source cybersecurity vendor on the planet. And we partner closely with guys like Sal and Craig Johnson at the Teneo Group, and we appreciate them bringing us in. And that's it for me.
All right, and then Jameson.
There we go. Too many mutes. Sorry about that, Sal. Jameson Nutter. I'm a chief evangelist for Order. I've been around cybersecurity and physical security my entire life, and work a lot around ransomware and the Internet of Things. So a lot of focus on protecting physical assets.
Very cool. Craig Johnson.
Craig Johnson. I've been around cybersecurity for almost 30 years now. Gotten to see a lot of evolution, even from IBM in the IT space, from IBM mainframes to cloud, you name it. Been around long enough to see a lot of that stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to impart some of our knowledge to help you guys in your business.
Cool. And I'm Sal Lombardo. I am with the Teneo Group. I am a sales manager here in the Northeast. However, I have a C-level background. I've been with the New York Yankees organization, Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment organization, and some others, where I've been able to see from an executive level really how cybersecurity is impacting not only the sports industry, but every single industry across the board. And then I've also been able to see the interactions between how the IT side of things interacts with the executive side, right? And at the end of the day, that's really important, what that communication looks like and what you know and what you don't know. So I'm going to fast forward here. I'm going to go through a few points that these are things that we need to know right now. Executives want to know, right? With IT being an integral part of all business, your business risk is becoming more and more tied to your cybersecurity risk. And you're going to probably hear that a lot today about business risk. There's all kinds of business risk. There's financial risk, there's competitive risk, there's all kinds. But right now, cybersecurity risk is the biggest risk because it has the single most impact on your business immediately. So phishing attacks are on the rise. Everybody's heard of phishing attacks. These create additional risk for loss of reputation, credentials, and even worse, loss of business. We have, if there's a successful attack against your business, it could potentially mean chaos, an extremely lucrative payday for attackers. With phishing attacks, they can be just a pathway to introduce worse malware or even ransomware. And we're going to get into these a little bit more. I'm just kind of rattling this off to give you a little bit of a preview here, and don't want to scare you, but these are very, very important things. And then IoT. What is IoT? IoT is the Internet of Things, and you're going to hear more about it. If you don't know about what IoT is, you're going to want to know what IoT is, depending on your position and what kind of business you have. It's a very, very interesting and new, not really new, but new right now to ways that hackers are getting into your system. So it's an easy access point for malicious actors to penetrate your network, thus putting your business at risk. Just to tee this up, we have some top issues. We wanted to bring the top issues, needs and concerns, risks that we found as the Teneo group. We see that cybersecurity modernization. Most organizations are not secure to the level that they need to be right now. That's just a plain fact. There's level 6 threats that are out there. Most organizations are secured up to level 2, 3 at the most. So you have old school cybersecurity defenses can mean business ending attacks. What does that mean, really? Business downtime, right? So if your business is down, how long can it be down before you go out of business? Do you know what that financial impact is going to be? And that's a really, really important one. Inability to support your customers. Well, if you're down, your computer's down, you don't have the ability to support customers at that point. And then loss of revenue and brand. There's a need to get next generation cybersecurity tools. You can hear a little bit more about that in this presentation and with the roundtable and the people that we have that are coming on. And the human element, phishing clicks, which lead to the loss of credentials and data. It only takes one person in your organization to click on the wrong thing, and that is it. They are inside your organization. They have access. They could potentially have access to everything and shut you down. So what do we need to do? We're going to be talking about cybersecurity awareness, right? Security awareness, security training, and what that means. Remote workers. Everybody has been talking about remote workers because COVID put us in that position. And with the remote workforce expanding, companies are scrambling to secure their networks like never before. And how are you doing that? What have you done? How are you securing things to make sure that people at home that are on wireless networks are being safe, or your company is being safe? Knowledge and expert consulting. A lot of companies right now, doesn't matter how big they are. You could be the smallest business to the largest business, but a lot of companies are augmenting their smaller IT teams with teams like ours. You bring to bear enterprise security and consulting and knowledge. So with all of that, I'm going to just break this down. We'll start the conversation. We'll kick things off with the roundtable. We have the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report. And this might look small. So if it looks small on your screen, I'll share with you what that says. But it says that cybersecurity is one of the key threats of the next decade. It's not going anywhere, right? We know that we have something that is not only not going anywhere, but likely over the next few years is going to only be exaggerated. And if you look, and if you can see this up in the upper right-hand corner here, these are the biggest impact and the likelihood of what's going to happen from a global risk perspective. You have climate action failure, infectious diseases, human environmental damage, biodiversity loss, right? And right in here, you have cybersecurity failure, extreme weather. All of these things there's nothing you can do about them, right? They just happen. Extreme weather. You can't do anything about extreme weather. It's going to happen. Can you prepare for it? Maybe. But the thing that you can prepare for right here is cybersecurity failure. And that's some of the things that we're going to be, diving into a little bit. And I'll open this up to the forum. There's plenty of stories that we can talk about. I know, Avi, you had talked about an issue with phishing, right? Phishing attack that had happened. Do you want to share that and see if we can have some discussion around that?
Sure. I've been a victim a couple of times. One was a situation in Singapore where a vice president of finance took a vacation, and we used a service company, kind of like a third-party accounting firm, to pay bills. And somehow people hacked into our system, got an email address for this vice president of finance, and communicated to our provider for payments that we needed to make a payment, and I'm going to estimate the amount to be $1,000, and it needed to be made right away. And the payment company and the provider did it. 2 days later, they upped the ante to $50,000, and the provider did it again. Then they upped it to about $150,000, and they got paid again. And then when they tried for about $300,000, the provider said, well, it can't go on. This can't be true. And they decided to stop it and investigate. There were many, many controls in place to prevent something like that from happening, but it didn't prevent it from happening. Everyone could point the finger at another associate and blame them, but it didn't prevent it from happening at all. Initially, when we got into this, we thought there was no risk financially to our company because we had cybersecurity insurance. But our insurance policy did not pay for work that was executed by a third-party provider. So that in that situation, that did result in a P&L hit, and it severed a relationship with a third-party firm because they refused to pay for it either. So it just plainly became our fault. So that's one example that I'll talk about. And I'll tell you other examples of just phishing would be people aiming to please a senior level executive. What do I mean by that? Someone would say, the CEO of the company said buy 20 gift cards and they needed to be done by the end of the day. People would fall for that. They'd go out and buy the 20 gift cards. 3 weeks later, they would need 20 more gift cards. You don't catch that until you get the receipt from American Express that this has been done, despite the fact that you have required training once a quarter, these things still happened. So when I talk to Sal and his group, I'm looking for ways to prevent it and to make sure that you have, I'll call it a 360 in terms of coverage to avoid bad news to the financial results. So those are my examples.
That's great, Avi. We definitely appreciate that. And I'll open up to the group here. Brian, John, Jameson, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's Brian. First of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'll call it the use case is prevalent because it's so successful. And let me start by, and I'll just say this, that for the scope of controls that a company, for instance, like Checkpoint or Order are delivering, which cover a wide range of what we need in cyber, humans remain the weakest link. There's no getting around it. In fact, I just did another presentation on trends in cybersecurity, and the one thing I would say is that we can expect, unfortunately, that even with training, that humans, myself included, you, all of us, no matter what your skill level, at any given moment could be subject to falling prey to that. With that said, it is possible to put some protections in place that can act as a front to pre-screen some of these things as they come in. And there's certainly diligence you can do it to reduce your risk of it. But humans remain the weakest link. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I was going to reinforce what Brian said. Honestly, this is there are so many problems we can solve with technology and process. But people always have been and always will be the single simplest point of attack. And in fact, if you break down a lot of tactics in phishing, the very things they appeal to, the need to appease a boss, the desire to move ahead, the need to save money, like all, if you just take the email and deconstruct all the technology language in it and bake it down to human emotions, these are the same tactics that we have used in intelligence, in defense, in all these places since the beginning of time. Like these things work on people because they work on a psychological level. So this training, cracking this nut, honestly, if anybody on this call figures out how to train people to not fall for those emails, you will be wealthy. Because it's human nature, right? All of us at one point or another have either come within a half a second or done so, clicked on those emails or followed those links or done those things because they appeal to who we are as people. So that process has to be maybe to wrap that up. We have to do everything in our power to build process and technology that can catch human error as much as possible. And no, we're still going to fail because ultimately that's the weak link, is to prey on that.
Hi, this is David DeSenza, and I'd like to chime in here for just a moment, if I may. Training is all well and good, but there also has to be a cultural shift within an organization. If it is not okay to pick up the phone and call the president's office to verify the fact that the president has just called or sent an email asking someone to go out and buy 20 gift cards, then you've got a problem, and you need to make it a part of the culture of your organization that that's expected behavior, that you're going to challenge questionable orders. Secondly, it should also be included in people's annual reviews. If you've got somebody on the team who is repeatedly falling for these things, there's got to be consequences to that action.
And you know, to piggyback on that, one of the things that we talk about at Teneo Group quite a bit is getting executives. I'm not sure how many executives we have on the call today, but getting executive buy-off for cybersecurity. And at the end, you'll see one of the things that we say is having a cyber secure aware executive. And what I mean by that is exactly what David just said. If you can't call the executive, or you can at least reach out to verify, to verify a check or verify something, or if the executives aren't pushing down the responsibility of security and putting some bite behind it, you're never going to get anywhere. We had a customer that Sal and I were in talking to. They bought a cybersecurity awareness program. They were trying to implement it, and the sales team would refuse to take the class. They just refused to do it. They just didn't want to go out and do it. And this is for the betterment of the company. So we sat down and we were talking to the executives, and the CFO was hilarious. He goes, "Oh, I can solve that problem." He goes, "They all get paid by commission. I will hold their commission check until they take the test or until they take the class." So at that point in time, the executive team has decided to put some bite behind the training, and training is just one of the pieces. I always write down the 3 Ps, which is people, products, and process. There's ways of solving issues with people. There's ways of solving it with process, and there's ways of solving it with products. And taking some of the troublesome errors of clicking things, there's products out there that can solve that. But still, like Brian was saying, it starts with the human. Does anybody else have another example? One of the things that, the other thing I wanted to say about phishing was phishing is normally the gateway drug. It's normally the piece that hackers use to get in, right? Mm-hmm. It's just to collect in a little bit of information, maybe to get an account takeover, to actually then put in malware or ransomware. But it's typically the first step of getting something. If they can get you to do something like get some credit card information or additional, that's great news. But a lot of times it's just the initial step to get more stuff.
This is Amy Anderson, and I am a service provider for multiple small and medium-sized businesses, providing the accounting, bookkeeping, CFO services. So I really picked up on what Avi said. And it is important, again, for anyone who has outside service providers. It's like that Target one. They had somebody doing something and the malware got into a Target's vendor. It has to, your insurance has to cover both ways, and your vendors have to have that insurance as well to cover that. But it also goes back to what David said, which is culture, which is whatever any company is providing, anything needs to have that security, because we're all connected. And, somebody driving by could get through on the someone who's working remotely because their network is not at their home, it's not fully protected. And some kid gets in because they're using the Wi-Fi to play the games while they're all home. And it just continues and continues. So you have to have that education. You have to have that culture to say, something may be wrong here. Anything that is required to be done immediately is a red flag. Anytime the CEO is sending something to accounts payable, yeah, that's a red flag. So, there are lots of red flags. And again, it goes back to education. People are going to be the worst. And it's not only companies. I mean, in another club, and all the treasurers in the US got hit with the same phishing. They got into a database and they sent out the same phishing of the CEO or the president of the club needs money. At least 15 people sent the money. And it's like, why? You know, how did they not know?
So Amy, that brings up a good, a really good point here. And I think Brian, with the technology that Checkpoint has, or, that's out there right now, if we can talk a little bit about the products that are out there, or the systems, and how we can avoid that from that standpoint.
Yeah, let me keep it a high level, because to Craig's point, you guys, the Teneo group, their specialty, so we're clear, is a higher view approach to that is not a product specific approach. Again, it's about, as Craig said, exploring it at a higher level in terms of people, processes, product. Your leading security vendors out there universally agree, and we're one of them, but universally agree that the humans still remain the weakest link, but we can put controls in place on devices like mobile devices, like endpoints, that mitigate the risk of this. And there's a conventional belief, if you've been watching the news, that something like ransomware is a lost cause. It's just a matter of time before, a financial community or anyone in the supply chain are going to fall prey to a ransomware attack, when in reality, we have an innovative ecosystem that's working to develop solutions to stop the spread of it, or block, at various points, even right down to your mobile device, block the entry of this malware. So it's not a lost cause at all. Human training, definitely a piece of it, but those controls can be put in place. Now, here's something for your membership to just chew on a bit. Pick your phone up right now. You probably have what I have, which is my own owned device. Some of you may be affiliated with organizations that have company-issued devices, but imagine your organization compelling you through, somebody called it, let's say, a rather strong approach to say, look, if we want to grant you access to what we've got through your mobile device, but we're going to compel you to install security software on that device, even though you own it and you use it, heavily for your personal life. We're going to compel you to install it. Would you? So this is a major challenge facing the BYOD, the bring your own device problem, and the mobile threat vector, where attacks are coming through mobile devices almost trivially anymore, is a major threat. And I would say that's a point of great discussion for us, and we see a big challenge there.
Yeah. James, so what do you think about that as well from your side?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of opportunities here. There are multiple stages in which we can combat this threat. We talked initially about phishing, which is sort of front stage, like how do I get in the front door? And the important part about these sort of threats is to remember it takes one to land and many expand, right? So you may be subject to hundreds of phishing attacks. You have 99 employees who properly identify it and don't click. One that does. Now I have a separate problem. So don't think that the cause is just stop it at first click, then let's move on to what's next. Okay, so it lands, I can detect it. And industry statistics lately show it's about 180 something days that malware lies dormant inside a network. And at that time, it's usually not actually just sitting there. It's moving around. They're looking for the right credentials, the right banks, the right places, creating new phishing campaigns to try to get to access. That malware is moved around. I found a database. They want to know what it is. How do I get into it? What data's here, right? They don't just come in and attack. They actually look for the goods. They're looking for your critical payable systems, your critical customer systems. In this time of lateral movement, this is detection. And so now we focus on user training. How do I stop them from getting in? Next, I look for, how do I see them with my looking glass as they're moving about my network, doing things that my users don't do, going places they don't go, moving to systems that are more critical. So I think, the analysis now needs to be, how do I look for stages of infection? Even further than lateral movement now, I look for additional infections. I look for systems that are doing encryption processes inside, like they shouldn't be doing that, right? This is ransomware activity. Look for increases of certain types of process like SMB or RDP. And then lastly, I can look for exfiltration. They have to get out with those goods. So if I look across my kill chain, I have the opportunity to leverage technologies even that can help detect those things as they're happening, aside from even prevention. So don't always just think I have to stop it or I failed. Continue to stop and detect along the process.
Jameson, I got a question for you, and this is on behalf of the people on the call. So I would say that your level is orders of magnitude above most. Some of the people that are on this call here today live this every day, as you do. You've had a whole career around it. How does the average company? I think this is a Teneo Group question. How does the average member of this group, or who obviously is well intentioned, they want to follow the steps that you suggested, but we have a shortage of people like you and myself and others. How do they handle the extreme shortage of skills, the cost to acquire these skills, to hire these people? I guess the question is probably for Craig. What are you recommending to companies that are facing an inability to get top cybersecurity talent to even have these discussions internally and try to set their firms up to be protected?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And to me, it always comes back to the people, products, and process, right? You define your process, get that going. If you don't have the people, then maybe you substitute products in for people where you can, consolidate products where you can. But then if you still don't have the people, then you outsource. And Amy had mentioned that she's doing managed services for the financial side. A lot of managed service providers have, security service providers have that capability, of one of which, like we can provide engineering or managed services. But that, what I really wanted to roll that into was kind of like what Amy was talking about, is that supply chain issue, right? The third party, and it goes all the way back to Avi saying that cyber insurance didn't pay for a third party problem. Well, there's, a couple of the latest biggest attacks, the SolarWinds attacks, and then the Kaseya, which was a managed service provider organization that was managing a lot of SMB businesses. They got hit, and everything beneath them got hit and got put at risk because of the way their system was set up. It sort of goes into, and I know I kind of answered your question, but I wanted to make sure that we sort of rolled into the next part of this is, what do you do if you get hit? And then how can you trust people that are around there? And what else is there even from the IoT space? I know Jameson had spoken at one point in time as we were discussing this event about getting an organization that had malware installed on the gate to the parking lot. And I'd like to discuss a minute or two about what IoT is. I know I sort of jumped over a little bit of the answer, but I wanted to make sure we could discuss a little bit about what IoT is, and why people should be concerned about this next level of attack.
Yeah, I think I'll field there for a second, and then I'd love to even hear others, kind of opinions. I actually think of IoT as any endpoint that doesn't have an agent. So it could be a Windows machine, a standard PC that just doesn't have an agent. And the reason I say that is your exact example of a parking garage control, or further, I would say a time clock, an MRI machine, industrial computers. These are full-fledged Windows or even Linux in some cases, computers, fully just like the desktop you use every day. The difference is they do one function. They have a single application installed on them, and they act like they're a thing. And by a thing, what I mean is it's a camera or a connected toaster or a smart television. They pretend that I'm a parking meter control mechanism. But what it really is a Windows computer with an application installed on it. And the vendor says, you can't put any agent on that because you'll void my warranty because I haven't tested it and I'm lazy and whatever. So what happens is I end up putting this Windows 7 device on my network to control the parking garage. It's vulnerable to literally everything ever listed, over 400 exploits, because I've never patched it. I can't. They don't let me. I can't put an agent on it. So what I need to do is I need to treat it as a thing. And that's why we call everything that is not agented IoT, because I have no control over it as a security administrator. Just like a camera that's placed there to watch the front door, just like the smart television in the lobby, I have no control over that device. I cannot place internal controls. So if I treat them that way now, what I do is I think of them as a service. That's really what IoT is. And the reason I say that is every IoT device was made to do a thing, a task. I watch something and I feed video out. The smart television displays information. There are certain tasks that it never ever does. The TV doesn't go to Facebook. The smart garage controller never logs into a bank account and never accesses my database. So my ability to restrict those devices using zero trust strategies is very high. I can create very specific policies, very specific controls that allow it to provide the service it provides to my network while not allowing it to do other things. So now if we separate the network into agented, I have strong control through various agent endpoints, whatever brand you like, and non-agented, which I control with the network. That's the easy division for me for IoT. Other people have other divisions, but for me, it's about control.
Jameson, I love seeing, the breakdown when you look at all of the things that are on the network. There's so many executives that we talk to that say, oh yeah, we know exactly what's on our network. We know all the different, IoT devices that are out there. And you run a checkup and there's just, they find 1,000 more than they actually thought were on the network. And it seems to happen quite frequently from what we're finding out, at least.
Yep, I'd like to just weigh in here real fast. There's a saying, without discovery, there is no security. So think about it. You need to discover what's on your network. If you don't know, you're not going to have any security. You can have all the firewalls, all the gear in place, but if you don't know, you're never going to be able to be able to mitigate that risk. So that's the mantra that you need to think about. Is how are we identifying all of these devices, which Jameson just articulated, that have the potentiality of getting on the network? And then once you know, then what do you do with it?
Yeah. Well, and it goes all the way to the garage arm that goes up and down that allows the cars to go by. Which ways can they figure out to get in? The digital billboards that are in your lobby, or even a fish tank at a casino, right, Craig? I mean, just incredible.
And Amy had referenced the Target attack years ago. That actually came through a third-party HVAC company that actually had a system connected up to monitor and control the HVAC systems inside the Target. And they were able to get into there and then hop over to the point of sale side. So
hey, Craig, let's talk about that, and let's talk about the supply chain. That is a really easy definition of a supply chain attack, right? HVAC vendor came in, connected into Target, and I'll just keep it simple, that launched one of the, obviously a terrible outcome. If you talk about Kaseya, if anybody on this call is not familiar, Craig, may I have a minute to? Okay,
you got.
Let me tell you what Kaseya is, because I'm going to guess that 75% of the people don't, or maybe more, don't know what it was. I'll keep it simple. The reason why you don't know what it was is because it wasn't as simple to get your arms around, for instance, as the Colonial Pipeline ransomware. Colonial Pipeline ransomware, you got your arms around here on the East Coast because it may have impacted your life quite directly. Kaseya, while you were watching fireworks, as referenced earlier, was higher up in the supply chain from, let's say, a dentist's office. Imagine being an employee of a dentist's office or a small business. Imagine coming in on July 5th and seeing that your entire network's been encrypted with ransomware, all because of a supplier that was not one, but 2 levels up in the supply chain. You don't even know what Kaseya is. You didn't realize that it was a tool that ran on your network. Your service provider used it. They'd even white labeled it or disguised it from, not on purpose, not maliciously, but you didn't even know it was a tool that was being used. Now your device is all encrypted with ransomware and you're being demanded to pay a ransomware, not to your service provider, but to some bad actor that attacked a vendor 2 levels up in the supply chain. So supply chain attacks are very, very lethal, and it's an area of great interest to bad actors because it's so profitable. We called what happened at Kaseya, the Kaseya attack, an amplification attack, because quite simply, they attacked service providers, and those service providers had customers like small businesses. So what a great business model for those bad actors. It's not a lost cause. We can put protections in place to mitigate the impacts of, let's say, a ransomware attack. But I want to be emphasize that this is a major and serious trend in cyber that we see going farther up the supply chain to the point where the victim may not even know who the originator of the attack was.
Well, and to piggy on that a little bit, a couple of things that are happening. The bad guys, and we're here to talk about all the bad stuff. And don't worry, we have some things that we can do to help at the end. But one of the things that they've changed, and guys, I'd like for you to talk a minute about it, is the different levels of extortion that the bad guys are doing now. Historically, they just wanted to get your ransom, but now they're exfiltrating the data. Brian, do you have a minute or two to talk about that?
I do, and I'll invite my colleagues also. I'll explain what double extortion is for those that don't know. It's actually a simple concept. Jameson correctly referenced earlier that the bad actors typically use like a phishing attack to penetrate and begin the act of discovering and stealing, and in this case, exfiltrating. So while you're busy doing your business, your company is slowly leaking data to a bad actor, unbeknownst to you. All right? So that happened. That data got stolen, and then all of a sudden, all the devices become encrypted with ransomware. It now becomes a double extortion. So you will need to pay your ransom to decrypt those machines. And if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to disclose that data publicly. We're going to sell it on the dark web. We're going to profit from that. We're going to damage your company's reputation. So now they have even more leverage to be profitable. I'll add one more dimension to it. In the case of the Colonial Pipeline, which you all, of course, were watching on the news, in that case, they stole the plans for the pipeline, and they had some, not all, but some of the pipeline plans. So John, I bet John on my team or Jameson can comment on the fact that they were threatening to disclose the plans for the industrial networks, which creates a whole nother level of disturbance in that, hey, maybe my accounting system's offline, but imagine if we take the pipeline offline and maybe permanently damage some of the valves and compromise that. So I'll let the Internet of Things guys talk about, how scary it is when industrial networks, we hop that gap between OT and IT. But basically, the short of it is that, we are seeing more than one vector of extortion that creates a highly profitable situation.
I'd like to piggyback on that 1 second. Maybe for anybody on the call who's not as deep in cybersecurity as some of us are, let's identify the actor, because frequently that's what I find when I'm on a panel and we talk about this. And I think there's some misperception by common folks about what a cyber criminal is. And the reason I say that is I come out of the intelligence community originally before I came into cyber. So I was well versed in what the world can really look like, what criminals can really be. Make no mistake that cyber criminals are just as bad as any terrorist, as any international thief, as any crime ring you have ever heard of, as any mafia show you have watched. And I'm not talking about murdering, people in the night. What I'm talking about is they will use any tactic. They will use any blackmail, any extortion, any piece of data, any trick, anything for profit. So the key here is we're not talking about 14-year-olds in hoodies that we see on NCIS. I'm talking about organized rings of highly skilled programmers, of highly skilled business people who understand business modeling that will use any tactic to profit in the industry that they be in. So the important part here is that we're not fighting against what typically the media shows us as your hacker. You're fighting against an industry. So don't be surprised when we talk about double extortions, triple extortions, that they're willing to sacrifice human lives or threaten it. Everything's in bounds. That's the key to the cyber criminals. I just want to make sure we set the stage on who the adversary really is.
Jameson, I'd like to say something on that too, because I'm not exactly sure who we have on the call today, right? As far as which companies they have, they might be small business, they might be some large business, medium, whatever. At the end of the day, right, I get a lot of people that ask me, what do I have? I'm a small to medium-sized business, right? What do they want from me? Are they going to come after me? What is my risk that's out there? And is this as great as taking down Verizon? And I think that's a good question, because for anybody on the call today, it's, well, what can we do? Are we buying down the risk right now? Are we using cybersecurity as an enabler? Can we afford the amount of ransom? And how does insurance really play a role in this?
I think there's a misnomer that I'm too small to be attacked. I think that's a great one to bring up. Let me give you two pieces of data there, and then I'll turn it back over to the other guys. I don't want to monopolize the whole time. But the two pieces are is smaller enterprises are actually more likely to pay than bigger enterprises because they don't have the resources. You're just to use Verizon, for example, they have red teams, they have lawyers on staff, they have people prepared for breach. They're breached all the time. Like, I don't know that for a fact, but they're a big company. So there's a lot going on, right? They are prepared for it at all times. Whereas a smaller SMB likely has never had a pen test. They've likely never even prepared for an actual ransom attack. So they're going to be caught off guard when it happens. They're much more likely to pay. The ransom is not likely to be 20 million. It's going to be 100,000 or 300,000. And it's going to be, the key is the ransom has to be within means for the company. They're always gauged that way before they're launched. Before I say you have to pay X for whatever I've got, I have gauged what they can pay already as the attacker. So SMB is actually a ripe target for most attackers because you're likely to pay. And when someone says, well, why would you want that $300,000 ransom over the 30 million that you might get from Verizon? It's an economics of scale. Look at the countries where the ransom is launched from, look at the average income of the people there, and then think about the ransomware amount. In America, the average wage is whatever, 90, 100,000, whatever happens to be for workers. But if I look at Ukraine, the average monthly programmer there, a skilled one, makes about $400 a month. What does that do in ransom? How does that multiply to a Ukrainian hacker? And that's just one country. Just go Google GDPs and average incomes for skilled labor in many of those countries, and you'll see that a $300,000 ransom is a lot in those countries. So you have an economy of scale. So anyway, I'll turn it back over to Brian and some of those guys comment more.
Hey,
Yeah.
so one quick question, Brian or Mike or Mark or Jeff, do you guys have any questions? I mean, the nice thing is there's some pretty strong knowledge on this. You have any questions, concerns, or stories that have happened to you, or every company has their risk tolerance for their business that's defined. That's how you decide your insurance and where you place a piece of equipment. Do you all have any questions? I mean, this might be a perfect time to speak up.
No question, but I recently was with a very small company and we were attacked and we were locked out for several days. I had to pay the money and get back in business. So
I want to ask that, whoever asked that question, I want to pose a counter question. So you were hit with a ransomware attack, you paid the ransom, made the decision that was the best thing for the business. There was maybe there was no other recourse. Would you now in the future consider that to be a cost of doing business? There is, between carrying cyber insurance or simply deciding that a ransomware payment makes sense despite what, FBI or what we might suggest. Do you see that as a cost of doing business moving forward?
Yes, I would. I mean, we were totally unprepared. We thought, I think, like a lot of small businesses thought, that we wouldn't, who are we? We're some small company, providing some specialty racking or something like that. So, who cares? But, nonetheless, it stopped everything. And, we did have to go back and rethink all that we did, how we approach things. We didn't even do training. So, yeah.
One more follow-up. What would have been the impact to the business if you had simply said, we're not going to pay it? Meaning you would start over. Did you even have the resources and the data backed up to rebuild everything, or it would not have been possible for you? If you're willing, I know I may have put you on the spot, but if you're willing.
Yeah. No. All of our sources were third-party providers, and there's, to the point earlier, that you have varying levels of capability, and it just didn't seem like it was there. So yeah,
thanks for taking the question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and one of the things, like there's cybersecurity frameworks out there. One of them is CIS Top 20. They just updated their framework from 2020 to 2021. And one of the things that got pushed way up, that used to be down at the bottom, like number 18 or 19, is not just incident response, but testing your incident response. And it's kind of like me with doing backups. Everybody should do a backup, but when's the last time you actually executed a disaster recovery process? 99% of the businesses out there, that's not what you do, right? And if you have a third party, a service provider, are they doing it, right? And if you're backing up, is it just a copy? One of the easiest ways to save against ransomware is to have backups and have them offline. So we're at like 8:51 right now. I'd like to see if anybody else has any other questions. And then, so we sat and talked for the last 40, 50 minutes about some of the things that we've seen, some of the stories that we've heard, kind of scared everybody. And so what we wanted to do is talk a minute or two about what can be done to solve this problem. But I'd like to hear from anybody else before we jump into this.
Yeah, well, I feel that this presentation has kind of bounced around to a lot of topics, and I'm not sure that it's been as helpful as it could be. And I was wondering if maybe you could kind of thematically put things in context by presenting either like the Lockheed kill chain or the Mitre attack framework, so that people had a sense of how all these things link together, as opposed to all these point conversations.
Sure, understood. So for people that are not familiar with the Mitre kill chain or the process, it's basically a process of an attack chain, right? From discovery to infiltration to implementation of an attack to execution of the attack to exfiltration of data to recovery from data. So it's a whole process that goes through. When we talked originally about phishing, there's two steps of phishing. One is maybe to get you to execute something, and the other one is to collect information to see what people can click on. A lot of times phishing is the initial step for somebody to click on something to download malware. Malware could be ransomware. Ransomware is the hottest topic that is out there today because it's the one that's most effective to get the end user to do something, right? It's abusive. And so ransomware is in the middle, but from the execution side. But the question is, did you lose anything before that? Was there anything exfiltrated? So that Mitre attack chain, the Mitre principle is the whole process of how something happens from beginning to end. And you're right, Mike, we did bounce around a little bit. We wanted to talk about phishing and ransomware and Internet of Things, and but how they fit in. Brian or Jameson, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the details before we talk about what can be done?
Yeah, the only comment I would make on Mitre or any other frameworks is the frameworks are great because they keep us aligned. You got to have a strategy and a plan, and that's what's best about any of them. I don't really propose one over another, whether it's NIST or whatever industry you're in, but have a framework. Have a plan that you're building to so you have a continuous method of improvement. Getting into the details of Mitre attack or defend or any of those other things are awesome. And those of us deep in the industry, we could probably talk about them all day. But the key here is don't become quagmired in those details. Allow the experts to use those as the technical details of how to execute a plan, but have a far-reaching plan that attacks how you're going to defend malware as a company, beginning, middle, and end, and allow the details of the framework or whether we're going to stop at an exfiltration or lateral movement or any of those kind of things. Those are execution details. Have a top level plan that says we're going to train users, we're going to detect things as they come in, we're going to stop things as they go out. Right. That's what I think is most important: is the executive awareness and buy-in that allow you to build a strategy that becomes tactics, that become techniques. So don't focus on the details. Focus on having total buy-in first, then go down. Well said.
Well said.
So the first thing that can be done is, in fact, almost every one of the frameworks like the CIS or SANS Top 20 and NIST, part of the whole process in that is to have executive buy-in, right? The executives have to make a decision. So the first thing we always say is, do you have executive buy-in for your cybersecurity plan? If the answer is no, like a lot of times your CEO is the worst of all of them because he wants to communicate via his phone. He wants to do everything on his own, right? So you make exceptions to the norm for your executives. So they need to, that's the first thing. The second thing that we talked about a little bit was the human is the weakest link, right? And it's true. So what can you do? And that takes us back to the people, products, and process. It's to educate the human, make them aware. And I think that actually is the next button. Make them aware, but that's awareness training to teach your humans. But there's also solutions out there that can help against phishing attacks to make the human aware. So if they click on something, it tells them, hey, you might be going to a phishing site, or this URL is not what you're actually clicking on. You don't want to do this, or you can just force them to block it. There are technologies out there, which is the people, which is the products, and the process is the awareness, and the people, of course, the people. And the funny thing is, as we were going through this process, and it was mentioned a couple times already, the bad guys don't care. They don't care if you're a small organization or a big organization. A lot of times they're throwing mud against the wall to see who clicks on something, and then they take advantage of it. From a distribution organization for gears, that all they do is sell gears and bearings, right? They don't care. If they can figure out how to get and stop your business from happening, now they have an advantage on you. So they really don't care about you. And don't think if you pay the ransom that they're gone, right? A lot of times we've seen, even with customers of our own that got hit by ransomware, after they did that, they became more cyber aware. And as they were more cyber aware, they were recognizing the hackers were still in their system, still discovering stuff after they paid the ransomware, right? So the next thing that we wanted to talk about, and the shameless sales slide, is you can get help. We can help with some of these things. The first thing that we always recommend is to make sure that check out your security, see what it is. There's a way that we can do those checkups. We talked a little bit about IoT, but there's also a checkup that we can do on your IoT space to understand what's happening. And a good reference point for this is we did this in one organization, and we discovered that a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply in the data center, was running a very old version of Microsoft on that device, which was infected. And nobody caught it because it wasn't like Jameson said, an agent-driven device. It was infected. Guess what that UPS was connected to? The company's crown jewels, their ERP system, was connected to that UPS. So that UPS was sitting there and watching all the traffic going across that device, because it was connected to the internet, because it was connected into that into the network. It was controlling that device and was collecting all the information. And it was only because of the asset discovery that we just figured that out. And on that note, a couple of the frameworks that we're talking about, the number one and number two pieces of every framework is to understand your network, to understand what's on your network, how it acts, and what it does. That's asset discovery. And the last thing that we recommend is, in smaller organizations, people are the most costliest piece of the environment, and also the ones that are normally overtaxed. So some organizations throw best of breed at everything. They keep buying more products. There's no way anybody can manage all those products. So we recommend, where you can, consolidate, and then take advantage of best of breed in the other areas. So anybody else want to talk about that a little bit?
I would just add there, Craig, that I would second that. I feel like that one of the biggest weaknesses next to the human that we have, like if we talk about what's a technology weakness that we have, it is the fact that we're often driven for best of breed. I certainly am. And then we don't stitch them together well. We'll end up with the best endpoint that we think, the best firewall we think, the best network detector we think, but we're not stitching them together properly. So this system might detect a thing that another system had information or context on, but I was not able to bring those together in my SOC. So I think that's why we need folks like Teneo to help us rationalize these systems together to get the outcome, which is the context necessary to understand this detection, this enforcement, and this point of access gave me a result that I could act upon. So I guess that would be my next piece is, again, strategy, right? Bring your best of breed solutions together and build a strategy for how to leverage them, how to use them, how to act upon them.
I think Teneo's in a unique position to do that. Everybody that's listening in here, and I think we favor a model of consolidation as well. We feel that that it's in best interest wherever possible to do it, and avoid many point solutions, whether best of breed or for whatever reason, tradition or history. And that's where the Teneo group can help out. And that's where, Sal, that's where you got to help these guys out and guide them in this direction.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I think this is one of my favorite slides right here, which is, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's Mike Tyson, right? And at the end of the day, that's what happens. You get hit, you don't know where it's coming from. You might not have Mike Tyson in front of you that's going to punch you. You don't know if it's going to be today, tomorrow, in 5 minutes from now, if anything, what's going to hit you. But, at Teneo Group, that's what we do. We help businesses, small, medium, large, doesn't matter what it is. We help businesses to secure their networks. You may have an IT team. You may have an IT company that helps you along the way with your printers and your networks, whatever it might be. We are more of the surgeons in cybersecurity, and we just focus on the security side. So we differentiate, but we do work with the IT teams and your IT companies within your organization. So, I just urge you to, if you want, reach out. If you have additional questions, please feel free to get in touch with Craig or myself. I'm going to put our information right here on the screen. Like Craig said, for the Beacon Group, we're giving away a free network checkup. So if you have a small and medium-sized business, large business, we will do a checkup on your system at no charge. And that's for AV and Zoe for being great partners, and we really appreciate that. We're also going to, Order has put the same opportunity out there. So if you want to see what other devices are on your network, visibility is huge right now. If you don't, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that goes for network and IoT. And that's really important. So if you'd like to get an IoT checkup done, we can certainly do that. If you want to do them in tandem, please reach out. My information's right there. And at the end of that is the security awareness, like Mike said, and David brought up and re-emphasized with it comes down to culture. And we can help you with this security awareness training for your people. If you want your people not to click on phishing attacks or phishing links and such, we can help you with that. And we have a discounted program that we can get you into. So, all of that is what we'd like to wrap up and bring here today. This conversation was really meant to just bring us to the top of mind, right? Cybersecurity is top of mind of many executives right now, but really just make you understand that it's your responsibility as the executives of the organization. It falls on you to make sure that your organization is secure at the highest level. And if it's not, you may want to just double check. And if you're not 100% sure that your IT person or team or company that is servicing you right now is doing what they need to do, then it doesn't hurt to check. And there's no additional charge. There's no anything. So I'll leave it with that. But if there are any other questions, or Zoe or Avi, if you'd like to close this out, just happy to help in any way we can.
Great. Thanks, Sal. I'm going to give you an example of something that we stopped. And I still challenge to find solutions to this. Is someone hacked into a vendor, and they apparently hacked into us, but nobody admits to anything. But it resulted in the hacker or somebody went to a marketing executive and said that we had a bill that was $1 million past due by 15 days. The marketing person needed some work done by the supplier, so they go to the accounts payables group and they want to get it paid right away. the people knew on this day that they were trying to execute this event that I was playing golf. They knew that the VP of Finance wasn't available. So they continued to apply the pressure on accounts payables. I finally decided that I'm not paying it. And they had a bank account for it to be wired to. But these things are well thought out. And I just don't know that it's all people all the time. I think people need a way, because this was all verbally communicated from one executive to accounts payables reaching out to me on a golf course because we had controls in place. But I think these are things that can easily get by people. And I just don't see a clear solution of how to prevent that.
So, Brian, do you want to talk a minute about, if this is all verbal, one of the things, you're right, some of the things, bad guys are going to be bad guys. And once they figure out that the products are going to be improving on the cybersecurity side, they may go back to old tactics about phone calls, right?
They actually are. So vishing, V-I-S-H, vishing, so voice attacks. This is a class of attacks that have made a resurgence, especially with the resurgence, or should I say the permanence of the remote worker. Whether you're in an office or more so out of the office, this impersonation of someone who has done their research, very, very challenging. But I think awareness programs and training, and again, it's not, Craig, to your point, it's training the people. I agree. It's a very, very big challenge. It's not something you simply provide, a day of training and people know about it. Although it sounds like you did your diligence to have those things in place, despite the fact that it was successful. Or actually, I should say not successful. If I heard you right, you stopped it on the golf course, right? If I heard you right. But putting those plans, those processes in place at the business level. So, Craig, that's really you guys. I mean, as far as backing you up with the right controls, we've got it. We see a huge trend of vishing attacks making a resurgence, and I'll tell you what else we're predicting as a trend. If you've not heard of it, and this thing called deep fakes. Deep fakes seem like science fiction. Go Google, go YouTube, Tom Cruise deep fakes. Trust me. Invest a minute and a half and watch it, and see the level of authenticity for which senior executives could be imitated in a video, or even government leaders could be imitated in a video, and see the level of authenticity where we are today, and imagine forward not too far where messaging is controlled like that. So yeah, those are classic, Craig, as you said, those are classic attacks the vishing attacks have been pulled out of the old school book and brought back, and to possibly to some success.
And this really does tie the people, products, and process together. There are products out there, when you start looking at it from the cybersecurity side, from the IT side, that that same attack has to have it transferred from somewhere, right? The bank transfer has to go somewhere. And there should be a process involved that if it goes to some place that's not on file, then the questions need to be asked. And that's kind of what I believe happened with Avi in his space. It was, this wasn't 100% correct. Now, the nice thing is that there is products out there that will start looking at the phishing side. But as soon as the phishing turns to voice, now it becomes a people and process step, because there's no way a cybersecurity product that's looking at your data, your ones and zeros, is ever going to look at your voice. It's just not going to happen. So that's why those three pieces need to be tied together.
Okay, thanks to the panel for joining us today. If there are no other questions, Zoe, do we have any questions in the chat line or any other questions?
I didn't see any, although if anyone has anyone and you want to unmute yourself to ask it, we do have a little bit of time. But we'd also talked about, if anyone wants to stick around, we can do some small group breakouts for networking. But I'll give a second for any questions.
Yeah, and be open, because the experts that we have with Brian and Jameson, I mean, we can go as low down the totem pole, down to the ones and zeros that you want to go. or as high as you want to the executive with Sal, as you'd like to go to.
I mean, I guess I'll just ask a question, hopefully briefly. We've talked about the ransom. What should people do? Should they pay? Should they not pay? How do you? You said they're still in your system right after you pay it. So what's
it's
the
a fantastic
wisdom?
it's a fantastic question. I'll take a stab at it, and I'm sure Jameson, you will as well. First of all, the general guidance is to not pay the ransom because, first of all, number one, there's no assurance you'll get your data back that way. There is a chance you might. There is a very high probability the bad actors will remain in, even if you pay the ransom. But on the other side of it, it's not so black and white. First of all, it behooves everybody to take steps, and there are well understood processes that Teneo can help you with if you're not familiar, that leverage the controls from Checkpoint or Order, or as well as any comprehensive plan. Take those steps now to make sure that you are in a position to make a decision about it. But if you haven't taken the steps, if you find yourself like many organizations where you're not in a spot, unfortunately, then it's just a matter of time before everybody will be there, then you may be forced to pay the ransom as a cost of doing business if you, for instance, have no recourse. If you can't, recover from your business, has a chance of not recovering. So yeah, our general guidance is don't pay it. But in real world experience, there are cases where, as that one gentleman that was on was sharing, where they felt they had no choice. They had to pay it, even at the risk of not getting their data back. They had to take the risk and pay it. But you're not going to be able to, the punch in the face, Sal, that's a great example. You're not going to be able to make that decision with a lot of leeway or latitude if you are not prepared. That's why you've got to reach out to a Teneo group ahead of time to make sure you have the ability to make that decision. It's a very, very good question.
I think I would like to follow, Brian, what you said. You actually ended exactly where I wanted to begin, which was don't ask us to pay or not to pay. You should consult with somebody like Teneo now, go through the exercises and understand what it means. Be prepared with your answer, whatever that is, with your legal, your executive team, and your consultants ahead of time. Don't make some philosophical decision that has nothing to do with your business, that has nothing to do with your risk, and that has nothing to do with your legal posture.
Yeah, I think, Craig, that goes into like cybersecurity, as a lifestyle, right? That we talk about a lot. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and that goes full circle back to like what Mike was talking about with having a framework and how does this roll out. Most cybersecurity organizations, including us, base their programs and their concepts off of a framework. We happen to build ours around the former SANS top 20. Now it's the CIS, Center for Internet Security top 20. And we do a program called Security as a Lifestyle. And it's more of an audit, a risk type of assessment. So you can understand where your business sits as it pertains to a framework. And it also gives you sort of a roadmap of where you could take your business if you want to go. But to pay or not to pay, we've had some of our customers get hit by ransomware. Some of them have chosen to pay, some of them haven't. The ramifications. The one that chose to pay, the principle was they know that they can recover, but it was going to take them 2.5 weeks to recover. But the risk for their business was about a week. So they made a financial decision. It was better to pay. And the sooner they pay, the quicker they could get back online and then still recover. The organization that chose not to pay couldn't bury, it was a city. They couldn't bury their dead for 2 months because they couldn't put out death certificates. So therefore they couldn't bury their dead. And they chose not to pay, but they were a city. They are always going to have income coming in. And, who cares if they have a bad reputation because they got hacked? But if you're a distributor or a trucking firm, the reputation that you might lose or the business you might lose, you may never recover from. So that truly is a business decision, and defining that risk and then tying your cybersecurity risk to your business risk.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.